Good morning, everyone. This is John with Gun.Deals, and today we are going to be taking a look at the edgiest handgun ever made, the STI Edge. But before we get into that, while you're here, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, and comment your favorite boomer shooter in the comments down below. Now, full disclosure on this handgun, STI no longer exists, so I have no relationship with them. They've been rebranded into Staccato, but originally they were STI, and the original owner who actually put this together, Virgil Tripp himself, allegedly, is unfortunately no longer with us. Now, how I came to acquire this firearm is a friend of the channel, Mike from Raiders Arms, sent me this to review and play around with because it was one of the guns that he had, but didn't really shoot that much. And now I know why. Now, getting into basics of the STI Edge, this is a true 2011 because STI, now Staccato, actually owns the trademark for the term 2011, which is just a double stack 1911. Now, because it's a 2011, you have a two-piece frame, so you have a frame itself, which is steel, and then in this case you have the grip, which is polymer, which is going to be one of the problems with this firearm that I'm going to talk about. It is covered in medium texture just about everywhere. It is certainly acceptable, though not my favorite. I do prefer a little bit more of a aggressive grip. However, I wouldn't change it, especially if it's in conjunction with the thumb rest. On the bottom, we have one of these ice magwells, and they are just absolutely ridiculous. You basically don't even have to aim, and somehow the magazine just ends up going where it's supposed to go. The insert is pretty beat up, but these are like 10-15 bucks. You can just swap out the insert with a new one if you wanted to do so. Working our way up the grip, we do have a extended magazine release, which I don't really need, although I do have smaller hands, though I don't mind breaking my grip a little bit to hit the magazine release. That being said, it works fine for everything unless I need to do left-handed shooting, and then it rubs right there where I'm shooting, so not particularly comfortable if you're doing like classifiers or something like that. Moving on to the steel part of the frame, as you'll notice in all of the shooting footage, I either had the frame taped, my hand taped, or both, because for some reason on a $2,500 handgun, they just left sharp right angle edges here in the back. Now, the owner has said that I should just sand those down, but I'm a little bit less comfortable sanding down a $2,500 firearm that's no longer in production. So I do have blisters and some cuts from just the frame itself being very uncomfortable from the way that I grip, because there are just, again, sharp right angles right in here where the steel frame meets the polymer, and it was a very unpleasant gun to shoot. Another contributing factor to that is that this is indeed chambered in 40 teach you a lesson, which probably doesn't help the sharp angles in the back of the steel frame all that much with my sensitive little hands. Moving on from there, this is the hard chrome finish, which is very hot and very expensive. I think back in the day, this was like a $300 option on your already fairly expensive pistol. The safeties in terms of fit and feel are pretty fantastic. Like, it's just a very positive little click, little resistance, clicks right into place, no movement whatsoever. Very similar story when it comes to slide to frame fit. It is a very smooth experience, if a little bit oversprung. It feels like 14-15 pounds, somewhere in that range. Maybe that's the correct spring weight for 40 Smith & Wesson, but it is a little bit tighter than what I was expecting. Now, moving on, this specific example also has the frame tapped for both the very aggressive thumb rest, which actually works really well. I found that very comfortable to shoot with, as well as you can also put an optic plate on there as well. Now, in terms of the factory sides, this also came with the Dawson Precision fiber optic front sight. However, the owner broke that off, so then he just shoved in another front sight post, which I put a little bit of white paint on, and it worked all right. I did shoot this both irons only for about 400 rounds, and then again with the optics plate installed, which is a little bit different. I don't think I've ever shot a frame mounted optic before, so it didn't change that much, but it's a very unique shooting experience, at least for me. Now, if I didn't mention it already, we do have a 5-inch bull barrel, which is fantastically accurate and adds a lot of non-reciprocating mass. Also looks quite cool. The slide serrations, I will say, are pretty darn sharp forward and back, so they have a lot of my dead skin just sitting inside of them because they are a little bit cheese gratery. Other than that, the fit and finish is kind of okay for a, again, $2,500-ish handgun, not including some of the other options that are on here. Now, the last thing that we haven't really talked about yet is going to be the trigger. And the trigger, while the shoe itself is polymer, which kind of lends to the whole thing feeling a little bit cheap, is actually fantastic though. So you have just a little bit of take up, you hit a direct, perfectly crisp wall, 3 pounds maybe in terms of total pull weight, and the reset is very, very short. So while it might not be the tippity top tier of 2011 style triggers, I find that it's pretty fantastic compared to everything else that I've ever shot. So if you're a true trigger snob, you might not like it, but for me, it gives me just enough feedback to be noticeable, and it's not heavy enough to be distracting whatsoever. That's everything else about the pistol itself. So let's go ahead and talk about actually shooting the thing. So with the thumb rest, with iron sights, I did find it very easy to control for being a little bit more snappy. Now, something else that I should mention, with the total weight of this package coming in at right at 40 ounces, it's actually a little bit lighter than I would personally like. For instance, my Carry Optics gun, which is a steel-framed rival with brass grips and whatnot, this comes in at 55 ounces with the light, and this comes in at about 40 ounces in a much snappier caliber. So I would like maybe a little bit more weight on there, though I don't think that's the biggest deal. For me, it really is just the ergonomics right here in the back and the way that this grip melds together. Just pretty uncomfortable to shoot. So again, either I was taped or the gun was taped, or both every time I was shooting it, because it was just a painful experience. Personal ergonomic annoyances aside, I actually think the gun shot very well. For instance, it's definitely snappier and pushier than what I'm used to, but being, you know, an extra 40 power factor over 9mm, I felt it was very controllable, and I definitely could have actually shot it quite a bit faster, but it is just getting used to that different recoil impulse. Shooting this back to back with my 9mm guns, while I was definitely shooting this a little bit slower, it was more of a me thing than the gun thing. For instance, I definitely could have been shooting faster, but in my brain I'm like, oh, there's more recoil, so we have to shoot it slower for some reason, even though I don't think that's quite correct. It is something that you need to have good fundamentals with, and even with iron sights, which I'm not particularly accustomed to at this point, I haven't actively shot iron sights in a very, very long time. I thought it was an interesting change of pace and still fun to do some shooting with, and I do intend to actually do some competitions with this firearm in the future. Aside from the pain, of course, I would say it's actually a fun gun to shoot. It's a little more snappy, a little more pushy, and it's just different enough to be entertaining if you're used to firing striker-fired handguns for the most part. Now, when we talk about reliability, that's where things get a little bit squirmy. And for most of the shooting, I did keep it very wet with a lightweight lubrication. However, there was at least one ammo type that it just did not want to function with whatsoever, and that was Fiocchi Range Dynamics 170 grain flat nose bullets. For whatever reason, every 3 to 5 rounds, you would get a failure to feed, and that was just incredibly consistent over about 200 rounds because I had bought 200 rounds of it, so that was a little bit painful. However, the 180 grain Blazer Brass and the 180 grain Federal Champion, all of that stuff fed basically perfectly. Every now and again, you would have a little bit of a magazine hang up. Now, these are Dawson Precision mags. Most of them have the standard follower. However, one of them does have the Cool Guy follower, which allows you to get 18 plus 1 in the gun. The rest of them with the standard follower get 16 to 17. Not sure what the difference is there, and these also come with the Dawson Precision base plates, which is actually quite nice. So if I did want to run this in competition, it would work all right. There's definitely some stages where you have an extra reload in there, and if you wanted to bump it up to open with the frame-mounted optics, you could probably get an extension or a full-send 24-round magazine if you so desired for probably 100, 150 bucks. So reliability with ammo it liked, pretty good. With ammo it doesn't like, not at all. Now, I don't really hold that against it since it is more of a race gun and you can tune it to run with your specific hand loads or your specific favorite ammunition type, so I'm not really going to hold that against it. So I am going to continue to shoot and evaluate the thing, and I'm going to try and actually run it in some competitions and see how it holds up there, considering it's a completely different division and style than I am used to, but it should be fun nonetheless. So with all that out of the way, gentlemen, let me know what you think of the STI Edge, if I kept you in the edge of your seat this entire video. But with all that out of the way, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace off.